do like digging into strategies of the MSP platform companies. Michael George is the CEO of Syncro. He joins me, and Dee Zepf, who is Syncro's Chief Product Officer, is part of the conversation as we talk about their product strategy, develop their XMM platform, and a lot about AI. Plus, you'll want to hear some of Michael's thoughts about the positioning of his competitors on this bonus episode of The Business of Tech. Are your customers getting the most from their Microsoft 365 Business Premium subscriptions? Are you delivering maximum value while ensuring best-in-class margins? Nerdio's new modern work features let you streamline the management of Microsoft technologies like Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365, Intune, and Defender. Reduce the need for multiple tools, consolidate your vendor stack, and deliver greater value to your customers. Help your customers maximize their investments, free up your team for strategic tasks, and drive meaningful business outcomes. With Nerdio Manager for MSP, a single, flexible platform with mix and match plans ensures a flexible, perfect fit for you and your customers. Deliver solutions that achieve real business impact. Visit getnerdio.com to find out more. Well, Michael, Dee, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Great to be here.
Yeah, nice to be here.
I always enjoy our conversation. And Michael, I'm going to start from like where we picked up a year ago. So you and I talked, and we had a whole conversation about the transformative potential of AI and your thoughts on automation in the MSP space. And I kind of want to get an update there and say, how has your vision for Syncro evolved, and how much of that have you been able to make tangible?
It's a terrific question, because always your perspective or prospective on how things are going to, evolve is oftentimes different than your perspective once you're there and look backwards. This industry, the concept of automation, as you very well know, Dave, has been around since the industry itself. I mean, there are products that were named Automate. I mean, this has all been about trying to reduce the amount of handwork by technicians and so many new tools and technologies between RPA and AI and everything else has really given people an opportunity now to finally do that and to realize it at a completely new level. So has a lot changed? The answer is yes, because when we stood, a year ago and looked forward at leveraging what was then the incarnation of AI, as Moore's law has accelerated exponentially. It's changing every quarter, not every year or every couple of years. And so we think about, do you need to build your own LLMs today and all that? The answer is no. So we have changed a lot of where we put our emphasis on automation, but the promise is just as great, if not greater. I'm not sure we even fully understand the potential of it, candidly.
So you hinted at last time we talked at a lot of relaunch and new initiatives. Are there particular outcomes that you kind of want to report back and say, these are things we've managed to get done that we're particularly proud of?
Yeah. Dee, do you want to talk about sort of the adoption of XMM and so forth? I think that's a great place.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm happy to. And so, Dave, when we came into Syncro, all-in-one package, RMM, PSA, and we, kind of took a look at product set, what people were doing with it, trends in the industry. We're looking at AI, we're looking at automation. We're also looking at security and how people are adopting and using Microsoft, or in some cases, struggling with adopting and using various Microsoft technologies. And so earlier this spring, we launched our XMM platform, which is really the combined PSA, RMM plus Microsoft 365 management. It's kind of a big development in the company, and it really just allowing people to just unlock the capabilities of Microsoft 365. And so we have, Entra ID integration. We're allowing people to manage their security baselines, to look at drift. The whole thing is multi-tenant, of course, because you don't build a solution for MSPs unless it's multi-tenant. And so, we've really seen a huge adoption, really rapid adoption from our existing partner base around this new technology. And so it's been really gratifying to see, just talking even to one of my partners, they were talking about juggling, 365 with devices and security. And they're like, we're spending hours going across tools and really feeling like we have some gaps, just kind of this concern of like is it really secured? Is it really locked down? And they are just kind of thrilled with now their users are all in one place. They're resetting passwords. They're looking at security. If something flags a risk, they instantly get a ticket. Technician has all the information they need. So it's really kind of closing the loop for them and just saving them a bunch of time.
Yeah, I've been watching what you're up to, and I admit freely that I'm always skeptical a little bit of the rebrand. You've got XMM, ConnectWise has a version. Everyone's got a version of that. But what I'm intrigued by is the transformation on the platform side. Regardless of what we call it, you're really looking at saying, hey, we want to move more toward platform. But the inclusion of Microsoft is the interesting kind of detail of the way that you're describing it. Tell me a little bit more about the way you envision them, because from my perspective, it feels a little bit like Microsoft is moving much more closely to that MSP platform, particularly with what they're doing in terms of management tools. So that puts them into an interesting co-opetition, competitor, cooperative nature. How do you view them in what you're putting together with the product?
Right. I mean, I think, Microsoft has always continued to, talk about moving closer to the SMB, moving closer to the MSP, and they are making some strides. The place where I've seen them make enormous strides and do something really game-changing is in and around their pricing model, right? Their licensing for Business Premium and the E5 add-on for the under 300 company is a great deal, for a ton of capability. The issue is you unlock this product, and under the hood, it's really 40 SKUs from Microsoft that all have their own portal, all have their own documentation, all have their own set of things to manage. And, Microsoft is, they're built for the enterprise, right? They're built for people who spend all day going, I work on conditional access up and down the stack. And that's not how MSPs operate. And so, we're really leaning in to try to just bridge that gap for the MSP, and we're seeing it really as a complementary, thing. We collaborated with the team at Microsoft on building the product, and so we were kind of in lockstep with them on what we were doing, how we were going to kind of help unlock a bunch of capability. And so we're not feeling like it's competitive from a Microsoft perspective, but really complementary.
Makes sense. Now, the other area that I'm really interested in right now is from my perspective, it feels like the real value for small customers, mid-sized customers, is advancements in the workflow. I can talk about this from an AI perspective, but I think ultimately what we're trying to do here is make people's workflow more efficient and more productive. And interestingly, the infrastructure pieces are kind of fading into the background. But that also leaves organizations like Syncro, who are focused on infrastructure management as at some level of pivot of saying, do we lean into taking that all away and make that automation just completely perfect? Or do we go along for the ride and get into workflow management at end customers? Give me a little bit of your take, both of that premise and the way you're thinking about Syncro in that forward-looking environment.
Satya Nadella is betting the company on agentic solutions. He has said it over and over again. He's controversially saying SaaS is dead. It's about agents and agency, and these are going to be sort of the new application workflows that get embedded in these environments that create, a level of intelligence in it. So anyway, and he's betting the company on that, and we're betting the company on him and them because of a couple of reasons. First of all, small to medium business market, as Dee pointed out, everything they do is for the large enterprise, and for good reason, right? They're they're a dominant player in a whole broad spectrum of things there, cybersecurity being foremost of it. But in addition to that, they've sat there and said, $33 trillion economy in North America, but 44% of it is in the small to medium business market, to Dee's point, at that 300 employee and less. Look at the pan-European market, Dave. 98% of their $17 trillion economy is driven by small to medium businesses. So they've realized, they've always known this, but they are missing a huge portion of the market, and they want it. And so they have been kind of nibbling away at that cookie, getting closer to the traditional, what do we call the four corners of managed services, because they own the operating system, 98% of it in the small to medium business market, but they need to get all the way up to the agentic business side of it. So what do they need to do? Own identity. And that's why you're seeing this big push, in and around that. That's competing against Okta, obviously, and Google. Google went out and bought Wiz, so they're going to be competing against Defender, right? These are like big tectonic moves. Google spent $32 billion buying something to go right at Defender and Sentinel. So this is the big world that we're operating in. And what we're doing, to Dee's point, is we're making these, they've done a great job of making them now incredibly affordable. We are enhancing and extending multi-tier, distribution and access and everything else, to the managed service provider so that we can help democratize IT services, and people aren't sitting there fighting their way through the next help desk person or the next technician like you said, let infrastructure take care of itself and allow people to now go, and I'll get to one important dynamic in this industry, but now go have these agentic solutions for the MSP to bring to their end customer and say, let me be. If you look in the large enterprise, companies are looking to their IT departments to help them figure out how do we optimize and benefit from AI. And in the small to medium business market, companies should be looking at their managed service provider to do the same. So we're going to help sort of seed the market in certain vertical sectors to help people go do that. The one last point I'll make about that is that, managed services started with RMM, as 30 years ago, arguably, at some level. But the only things that have become categories of, Pax8 has 144 items on their line card for managed services today, but there's really only been a few products that have become categories unto themselves. The first was backup and disaster recovery, PDR, and the second is security. And the biggest difference, unlike PSA and network monitoring, is because they're things you get to sell to your customer. It gave the MSP a reason to meet with their customer again. Let me tell you about backup. Let me tell you about security. And in the same way, this is that next evolution, that next generation of something for an MSP to be a real strategic partner, to be a business partner to their business user and not just be their, reactionary IT department. So anyway, that's kind of the big macro spectrum of what's happening here. And we are helping facilitate that movement and the democratization on the IT side, but also the evolution of the relationship between the MSP and their end customer on their business app side.
Well, as Michael, you laid that out, the obvious follow-up question then is, okay, how do you translate that vision into the product you're working on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there are a few different components to this, right? And so there's the, kind of what you can accomplish in product today, right? Which is oftentimes focused in and around how do we help MSPs reduce their cost, helping them automate and kind of shape the role of the technician, right? That's where this is all kind of born from. And then you go, okay, as we look to, doing that, then it's like, all right, so we're automating, we're adding these new capabilities. How are we helping our MSPs to offer a more highly differentiated service because they're working with Syncro? And what are the things in product we can do there to help them differentiate? Today, a lot of those things are in and around, once again, purely the IT space, like in and around security and compliance and kind of helping them level up their game in terms of what they can bring out to their customers. And as we look at this and kind of the helping to unlock where AI meets kind of classic automation, and we can take that out to clients, thinking about Syncro as whether it's the orchestration layer that kind of helps to seed these things out. More to come in the future on a lot of this. As Michael said, I think we don't know exactly where it's going today. We know it's this general direction and we're starting to move there. But it does feel like the possibilities are pretty endless with where this can go.
So frame that a little bit for me, because it's interesting because you've thought I'm on board with the idea of this could be very much the orchestration layer. And there's two ways in my mind this could go, and maybe you've got other ones. The first would be hey, you could lean heavily into orchestration for the provider themselves. We're going to be really good at helping the provider be good. But as Michael alluded to, selling products to customers that they can deliver a solution. Can you be the orchestration layer for the customer to run on? Like, how do you think about where that orchestration layer would live, knowing that I'm not asking you to promise a particular product, and we're just saying like, hey, give me the direction that you're thinking about this in.
Right. I think it ends up in both places, right? I do think it ends up with some parts of this at the end customer. And it's always a delicate balance, right? Because the end customer, it needs to be simple. It kind of needs to be this like very streamlined thing. They don't want a lot of choices, right? They want the choices and the configuration and all of that to be done, at the MSP. And that, so for the end customer, it does feel like there will be some of this there. If it's especially if it's a vertical, business process for them inside their company, there's going to need to be some level of decision making and, checks and balances, monitoring different parts of it that feel like they live at the end customer. I'm not exactly sure where that line will be, but my guess and my, kind of prediction would be it does land in both.
Okay. But I would think that leaning into the MSP side is probably the logical first step. Am I sort of thinking like that makes a little bit of sense?
I think that's absolutely right. Like starting with MSP business process, starting with orchestration at the MSP, and then taking it out to that endpoint would be the natural progression. Once again, you never know what you're going to discover along the way when you approach these things with that kind of iterative experimentation mindset, but that seems like the likely path.
Gotcha. So Dee, I kind of want to channel the channel for a moment. And I spent a lot of my time listening to the conversations, particularly that happen online. And if I were to aggregate a lot of that, there's been some discussion about the pace of platform development. Now, I think that's really hard to measure, right? And I think that the community might have one view of it and you have a very different view of it. Talk to me a little bit about the way that you're measuring the pace of development of the product so that we can, so that the community themselves can know the way you're measuring progress.
Okay, so this is just purely in terms of like delivery from like a Synchro roadmap and kind of cadence and pace of delivery perspective.
To a certain degree, but I also want to extend it to the idea of we've literally just painted a really big picture. How does the community know you're getting towards it?
Yes. Okay.
Is a good way of thinking about it.
Understood. Yeah. So, it's interesting, so as we think about kind of roadmap and where we're going, we tend to have a strategic look that's a 3-year strategic look. And then we, kind of break that down into what's, remainder of this calendar year, what's next year. And then as we're delivering, the small things we deliver on a day-to-day basis, bigger things we deliver on a monthly basis. And so, the way I, kind of measure our cadence, I will tend to look back and do a quarterly look at kind of like, here's where we need to go. Here's how we march it out over quarters. I'm not at this point where I can, kind of go, okay, and here's which quarter you'll see this in and that in, but that's how behind the scenes I'm kind of looking at, marching to these different milestones.
Okay. Now, the other thing I want to throw is, and I kind of want either one of you can jump in on this one, depending on the way you think. I've been really looking at this space and saying, I fear for a situation where we end up with a bunch of haves and have-nots in the delivery of managed services. And what I mean by that is I think there's going to be a group of providers that are significant and grow ahead into a world where they are super focused on business process, that are really implementing, outcome-based, delivery, that they are really the haves of this. And a lot of it is based on they've hit some level of size, scale, capability, and they've made the jump to light speed and are able to really outpace. And that leaves a bunch of have-nots that are going to be struggling to keep up with that. Does that align with what you're seeing out in the market and how you're thinking about the development of this space?
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah. Let me just start by saying, we pulled, and I have great respect for the work that Paul Dippel's team at Service Leadership have done for a long time. We pulled their most recent report, and sure enough, they have that whole OML 1 through 5 scale. The OML 1, 2, and 3s are the ones you're talking about. you're worried about them getting left behind, and for good reason. And then you have the OML 4 and 5 that, they are looking ahead and they are thinking about the things we're talking about here, and they're starting to lean in on it. That is right now 20% of the entire market. 134,000 MSPs in the first world economies that they serve. And of them, 20% only are OML 4 and 5. So your concern is well justified, as proven by these incredibly well-researched statistics. So you're not wrong. And one of the things that we're working on, is taking those 1 through 3s and, as I used the term before, help democratize IT so that they can, and these are old, terms about don't work in your business, work on your business, be the business person, be thinking about growing and building and scaling and becoming a real, true strategic partner to your end customer. Those are OML 4s and 5s. And for those that just decide, I'm going to go and adopt the Microsoft stack, I'm going to reduce my stack by being able to do that, I'm going to create a level of operating efficiency that enables, it's not like, I'm going to go fire an IT person anymore. This is about, I'm get to redeploy them into far more strategically valuable, non-commoditized work, which the managed services work is, it's commoditized today. It's very difficult to differentiate yourself there. But give that company an opportunity to either repurpose some people or to bring in people that have those skills. They're kind of a business analyst, vertical market business analyst, meets sort of engineering-minded person inside of an MSP. Far more gratifying work, far closer to the customer. But they do need to embrace it. There has been a call to action in this market, and it's like, pay attention. And again, Microsoft's trying to enable this. They have an objective. It's not just for the betterment of mankind. They want, the small to medium business market to adopt these agentic solutions. And the channel, they are a 100% channel company, number one. Number two is they're not going to work their way through the small to medium business market. They've been declarative about that, and they're not configured for it in any way. And so they need the channel. They need the MSP, to be able to go do that. And again, it's a two-step process. You adopt the platform so that you can get a lot of that handwork out of the equation, and then start to, and to your point, as Dee said, it starts inside. There's nothing better than being a user of the technology that you're going to be promoting anyway, and then go get these vertical solutions in place with your customer. It's an extraordinary opportunity for people.
That makes sense. Now, I want to, particularly because we're talking about the AI opportunity a lot right now, and Dee, I suspect you've got the perspective on this. You guys have leaned into some AI feature launches, particularly around smart ticket management, ticket sentiment analysis. So I'm really interested to learn, what have you learned about the implementation of generative AI and some of these new, technologies around machine learning that you can help MSPs understand what the models are capable and not capable of, based on the fact that you've invested in building out products around them?
One of the bigger learnings was trying to really determine how you can measure a quality response and what does quality look like, and then how can you continue to refine that without kind of needing human interaction and intervention on it. And so for us, we've really been working behind the scenes on trying to get the model together to be able to do that in a much more efficient, cost-effective way, so that we're leaning in on AI for the places where we can have it produce really quality results, and then leaning back out for a human in the loop, a place when a human in the loop is the thing. Because, there's nothing worse than, you see someone even just using a regular GPT, and they, very obviously will generate some generic answer or article or something, and and so having something that's refined, that does have a human in the loop, that does have that logic and that kind of behind the scenes intelligence is something that I think is a challenge. But I think it can be done and can be done well. And so that's something that we've been really spending a lot of time on behind the scenes.
Can you say a little bit more about how you're measuring the quality of the output?
Yeah, so we've been, working with different eval techniques behind the scenes in terms of looking at either testing across different models or looking at different, measurements of efficacy behind the scenes. We'll also do some level of sampling and human testing. And so we've kind of combined a mix of different methods. And then we're starting to figure out which methods apply to which situations in the best ways.
Gotcha. So, and in particular, I'm leaning into that because one of my basic premises around AI right now is there's a lot of space for MSPs to do advice on the way to implement AI. So, are there particular bits and tidbits you can give from that expertise that MSPs should latch onto the way they think about it with their clients?
Right. I mean, I think it can even start outside of product and outside of tech. And the place to start is even just for MSPs to be helping people to kind of leverage like AI at work, right? How can you go, okay, what's your role? Like, okay, what are the types of documents you generate? What are the types of research you need to do? How might you be able to do some simple prompting? What are the prompts you might want to use? How can you, get better results? It used to be like you go, okay, this is my role, right? You tell the LLM, like, I'm a product manager at Syncro, and all of a sudden it's going to be magic. And now it's turning out that that's helpful, but it's maybe not quite as helpful as going, I'd like you to critique this thing that you just gave me as an output and tell me how to improve it. Now I'd like you to take those 3 suggestions and improve it with those. And so I think MSPs can start at the basics and kind of give their clients even just some resources on how to just use AI manually, right? How to just type into, whether it's Copilot or whatever they want to use. And then they can figure out like, maybe if they want to do something across the organization, then they can go in with more bigger readiness projects and kind of say like, is all your data Copilot ready? Are you getting there and getting folks to Copilot ready for across the organization deployment? And then they can come in and layer in potentially automation and verticalized solutions for their customers. But I think they can start small.
Now, knowing I'm flirting a little bit with technical implementations, but I know I got to learn a little bit without giving specifics away necessarily, unless you're comfortable. Give me a little bit of a sense of how much you have to lean into knowing different models and how much of that is in-house versus how much you're leveraging, providers like OpenAI or Anthropic or Microsoft. Like, give me a little bit of a sense of how much has to be in-house and built out and how many models you have to use.
Yeah, no. And so I think this is something that has shifted over time and will continue to shift. I think a year and a half ago when we walked in here, it wasn't quite as clear that there were going to be like giants in the model business. And, like for a while, it just felt like there was a new model version that came out every day, and so for us, we want to lean into what we're good at and using our data and our expertise to provide context to these models. We're not going to go out and kind of generate our own set of things. And so we have been leaning into using models from like Microsoft and other providers that we're, kind of using our data to provide context and to, just try to get the best results out of them. So, more to come on that, but it definitely has shifted over the past year and a half.
Hey, Dave, if I could, just tagging on a little bit to what Dee was talking about earlier, one of the things that we do, like sort of programmatically a little bit, is we help guide our MSPs to go to their end customers with a little gamification by saying, hey, pick your tool, as Dee pointed out, you pick your flavor, Copilot and so forth, and just put together like, contests and show and tell about how are you using AI in your function, and then come together as a company, right? Go together as a function and do a little show and tell. And now you have like this cross training in the organization across these different functional departments. Like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. Or anyway, so there's a lot, that can be done to start to get people to, really understand it and embrace it and, understand the power of it. And start to use it across. And I just want to make, as a little sort of tidbit for your audience, it's a great way to just really start stimulating, some real thinking about it in their functional roles every day. It's a lot of fun.
Well, I'd agree, and that's why I'm also like saying the platforms that they use day to day, the lessons learned of your investments in models are ones that they can take to their clients. Now, I could go on about these things all day, and I want to my last little bits of time, Michael. I have to know a little bit about how you're back in the game now for at a XMM company. You're focused on this space. It's gotten a little interesting again in this space, and I won't name but there's been a kind of a bit of reshuffling as we've got more up and coming competitors, might be the way of saying it, who have now becoming more established players. How are you thinking about like Syncro's position in the MSP platform market and how you want to stand out as a differentiator?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can only guess who you're thinking about or talking about in terms of sort of an up and coming contender. Look, I'm, with all due respect to where the market sits today, as you know, I always say these markets all come down to like three because nobody really could or should count, past three on any of these things. And obviously your three largest companies in the space today are Kaseya, ConnectWise, and Enable, publicly traded, 520 or so million, sort of the smallest of the three. And you've got some up and comers that have done some really nice job on sort of innovation and UI and everything else. And I would say sort of the two contenders in that up and coming world have chosen their paths. I think, Ninja, took investment in from Google. So, it would be no surprise that they're going to go lean in on, Google Identity and the productivity suite and try to work their way up into Gemini and maybe eventually end up on the AI side of the equation. I'm not, I don't have insight into their product roadmap and not declaring things that they've declared. I'm just saying that would be the natural path. And we as the up and comer are doing the same thing embraced around Microsoft. By the way, there isn't a winner or a loser in the Microsoft Google world, but there will be one of them. So again, hitching your wagon to those stars and driving, initiatives that don't enhance those environments. It's good, for companies like us to be able to go do that. I don't think Microsoft's going to lose, but I do think they have a better chance of winning because again, they own the operating system. They're the largest cybersecurity company in the world. I know, Wiz might might affect that in, eventually down the road, but it doesn't matter. And I think, and then you have Okta, obviously, in the identity space. I think a lot of the security stuff is shifting. It used to be very endpoint related, like you were doing, detect and response and everything else around device and so forth. But identity for security purposes is really around the individual. Like, who is Dave Sobel? Whether he shows up on his phone, his iPad, his computer, at a hoteling, it doesn't matter, right? It's and being able to go and secure you that way. And I think Microsoft is really ahead. And I think sort of, we are the two up and coming companies that are helping facilitate, those two companies kind of winning in their own space, sort of the arms dealer model.
Okay. Well, actually, I'll play a little bit and I'll tell you this is the way that I was framing it, and then you can tell me how I'm wrong. So I don't disagree with your framing that I think there's three positions there. I would have actually said ConnectWise, Kaseya, and a third. And I would have said, I think Ninja's in that slot with Enable dropping off. They're not growing. My data shows that they're not growing. The latest Canalys stack ranking shows they're not growing. Quick disclosure, I am still a shareholder there. So that's the one. I have to do that quick disclosure, but I would say that they are falling out and not growing. And so I would say that I would say Ninja's in that up and coming bucket. I would absolutely put Syncro in that as well. I might consider Super Ops or Halo. And I would actually say that I think that there is space to fight over those three where nobody's stable. Because you can clearly see Enable was the first to fall off. I'm not seeing ConnectWise necessarily particularly growing, and I'm seeing Kaseya in a reset opportunity. So that means all three positions in my mind are fair game. And thus, I would sort of say there's 5 or so players jockeying for 3 spots. And I think you're in that mix. How far off am I?
No, I think that's right. I do think it's worth noting You're not wrong, and I respect each one of those companies for what they have accomplished. And look, Enable's a publicly traded company, so anybody can go see.
Yeah, anyone can look at their numbers.
Where their growth rate is only through the expansion of revenue from 2 new product categories for them, with their Cove offering and their security offering. But as it relates to Ninja, they've done a really nice job, but they've also been a single purpose solution just in the RMM space. They made an acquisition that puts them in the backup space. Maybe not a bad thing, and it's certainly a good enough. But this is the first time they've ever done that. So, and acquisitions and integrations and all of that stuff come with challenges. We know that from watching Kaseya and ConnectWise struggle, choking on the acquisitions that they've made and never ever being able to really properly pull them apart. And Ninja has declared that they're going to be building their own PSA. All left to be seen. They're not a platform yet. They are only an RMM. We, on the other hand, again, have made a very conscious decision that the platform that we believe is going to be the dominant one in this space is Microsoft. And we're spending our time and energy standing it up and enhancing it and extending it and making it accessible and usable and everything else in the category that's going to ultimately maybe reduce at some level, maybe not eliminate, but potentially reduce a significant amount of the third-party products that are in this space, to help simplify the stack. So we're going at it differently, but I would say that that's it. Atera, you mentioned Atera. SuperOps is a non-factor in our market, so I don't even know what they're doing anymore. And Atera has kind of taken a left-hand turn, and they're going to the internal IT space. They have considerably taken themselves out of the traditional managed services space, but regardless, they're more of the traditional all-in-one. They don't have backup. They don't have security. And so forth. But anyway, everybody's got their own place of this, but I think you're going to need to be more of a fuller platform, legitimized by proof, not just declarations, acquisitions, and promises, but really go deliver on it. I think this market's been hanging on to those promises for years from the guys that are now stumbling, at the, in the Kaseya and ConnectWise world. So
a very fair assessment. So I don't want to be respectful of our time. My last question then is so I started our conversation where we picked up from last year. What do you want to be talking about in say, let's go with 10 months time when we're connecting again for one of these long interviews? What do you want to be talking about then?
This is really largely a security first market. And I don't, and so we're spending a lot of time in and around sort of the Microsoft suite. They are the largest cybersecurity company in the world, whether it's declared that way or not. They are larger than Palo Alto and CrowdStrike in their revenue in cyber. So they're the largest, and they're but they're all enterprise focused. And if you can bring an enterprise grade, cybersecurity solution to the small to medium business market, that's a very powerful thing. And if you can do it at sort of the foundational level, which again, things like Entra ID and Intune and so forth enables you to do, and wrap around Defender as an orchestration layer. So I think first and foremost will be thought of really enabling that at that level. And then secondarily, leveraging a level of automation that will also have, this agentic solution capability in the hands of our MSP partners to bring to their customers.
Well, I will make sure that we talk about that next time we talk. Michael George, Dee Zepf, thanks so much for joining me today.
Dave, thank you.
This was great.
Really grateful for the opportunity. So
appreciate it.
The Business of Tech is written and produced by me, Dave Sobel, under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed or followed on your favorite platform. It's free and helps directly. Give us a review too. If you want to support the show, visit patreon.com/MSPradio and you'll get access to content early. Or buy our Why Do We Care merch at businessof.tech. Have a question you want answered? We take listener questions, send them in, ideally as a voice memo or video to question@mspradio.com. I answer listener questions live on our Wednesday live show on YouTube and LinkedIn. If you've got a comment or a thought on a story, put it in the comments if you're on YouTube, or reach out on LinkedIn if you're listening to the podcast. And if you want to advertise on the show, visit mspradio.com/engage. Once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again on our next episode.
Part of the MSP Radio Network.